che mo fa sera.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am your host, Matterall. So today we're going to talk about the eviction of Hard Knocks in their system called Rage. And we're going to talk to the people who actually planned it and executed it, and they'll tell us all about how that went down. We'll get to know them in just a minute. We're also going to cover a little bit of other news, some stuff that's we would call a PSA about the Christmas gifts that are coming out from CCP. Very important stuff for you to know. But first, we want to say hello to Carneros.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. Good to see you.
You were part of this thing, right?
Yeah. I still have a character logged off in Rage, and I had a great time. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Also joining us from Talking in Stations, Valahorn Mistwarden. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
Very good. Nice shirt.
Thank you. With being very serious, there's a lot of market manipulation that's going to happen with these boosters. So we're being very serious today.
That's right. That's definitely a financial shirt. It's blue. I like it. All right. And today on the show, we have the FC for the initiative, and that is Pando.
Hey.
And also joining us from the initiative are, I guess, some ex-wormholers. Let's meet them. First one is Riven Averon.
Hello.
We also have, you might be a little low. You might want to check your volume there. Right. Riven, real quick, tell us where you're from, or are you in initiative now?
All right, is my mic volume better?
Yes.
Yeah, my internet decided to take a walk just before the broadcast started.
Always happens.
Yeah, so I used to be in a Wormhole Corp about two and a half years ago or something like that, with a lot of people, a lot of my friends who I'm still friends with today. Some of them are now in the initiative and have been for a long time, and some of them are not. I joined the initiative 2017, around July, I think. And so I've been there for a year and a half at least. And I joined a Swedish corp called Big Shadows. And, in an online game like this, finding a corp that is a national corp that speaks your language, it has a great appeal. So I joined with 4 of my friends from Wormhole Space and all Swedish people. And we've stayed there ever since, and we're super happy. It's a great corp.
Great. It's nice to meet you. We'll find out about all the stuff that you helped put together. We also have from the initiative, I believe, is Dom, or Dominic Solaris.
Yeah, hi. I'm currently in an alliance with the initiative. That's true. But yeah, I'm a wormholer. I've been playing in wormholes for the last 2 years. And Riven mentioned that group from 2 years ago or so. That's where he, Ari, and I met. And I've just been enjoying the wormhole life for the last couple of years, and currently found myself in our current topic of today.
Great. And I think our last guest is Ari, who is Aracene She.
Yes, and I'm also from Tempest Legion and have been living in Wormhole Space basically since I started playing the game a little over 2.5 years ago.
Great. Well, welcome, everyone. Tempest Legion. I've heard of Tempest Legion. Do you guys want to tell us a little bit about Tempest Legion before we start?
Sure. The Tempest Legion has a story that goes back way before Ari and I ever got involved, but we know a little bit about that era. And back then, R34 was a famous FC that we still got asked about years later. And Icer XX was our CEO. And they had some renown for being particularly well known at fighting against odds of, heavy outnumbering and that sort of thing in LowSec. And then eventually it kind of fizzled out. And at one point, Icer rebooted Tempest Legion as a wormhole entity approximately 3 years ago now. And just by happenstance, I sort of fell in like right at the beginning of the reboot when I had come back to EVE. And so I ended up in Tempest Legion, and Ari came along right shortly afterwards, and she was learning the game for the first time. And Tempest Legion was figuring out its wormhole or place in wormholes. Started out in a C4, ended up in a C5 with a C5 static, and looking at the big picture of wormhole space, I guess. Trying to do big things.
Yeah, we definitely tried to get into the C5 meta, brawling, using caps, and getting into those big fights. We of course wanted to be able to beat the likes of Laserhawks and HK and brawls and stuff like that. That was kind of our goal.
Another one of our goals too. Ari and I eventually found ourselves in leadership there. We sort of prided ourselves on taking the newer bros, that wanted to get into wormhole space, but maybe didn't have the capital or the SP that a lot of the other corps were kind of expecting as like a baseline, like 20 million SP minimum requirement. You got to be able to fly a T3, yada, yada, yada. We sort of prided ourselves on taking brand new guys that were like around 5 million SP, throwing them in some nesters that were sort of memed on because they were rather expensive but low skill requirement, and just getting them ratting. And we got people to inject really quickly into our PvP doctrines, and so we saw a lot of growth that way. And because people could fly the ships, they were excited to be in the fleets, and they were excited to learn PvP mechanics. And so we actually had a lot of really cool success stories about a 5 million SP guy who 2 months later is turning into a rather competent PvPer. So that was kind of the thing we tried to pursue.
I think myself and Riven both injected a ton because of the ratting we did in that corp. We definitely got kind of made fun of for ratting all the time, and we always locked down our chain and stuff to do it. But we definitely had a lot of people who were able to inject up to higher SP relatively quickly.
Wow. All right. Well, we'll talk a bit more about Tempest Legion, because you guys play a key factor in all the events that followed inside of Rage. But let's first talk about what actually happened there. We'll start with Pando. Can you tell us what this all is? What were we talking about today?
Well, so basically what happened is the Keepster, or the two Keepsters that most of EVE would have probably thought to be impossible to kill, got killed. And, Warmoders are not happy about it being nullsec guys, I think. But, yeah, that's what happened. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So the thing about it is, I wonder, there wasn't any grudge between the initiative and HK that would prompt you to want to do this. It was more what you just said, the impossible being done, right?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, the only guy I've known very little was Capri. And I think at the time he wasn't even in HK. But when I say no, I heard him talk maybe 2 sentences on one of the FC Discords. That's it. He seemed like an all right guy. So there was no bad blood or anything of that kind. I was just happy to do some awesome stuff. And the other guys said they can do it, so we went out and did it.
So that's from Initiative's point of view. What about from the let's actually go to the beginning of how this actually started, and then we'll work all the way through it, and then we'll come back to say, ask you why it happened in the first place. So let's go back to the beginning. How did this actually start?
So the very beginning was actually a late night conversation of me and Riven. We were talking about all kinds of shit for hours. So we were just, chit-chatting. It was a good conversation. And then I don't know why, but it drifted towards HK and the typical, it's a shame, keeps us in wormholes. How are you supposed to kill them really? It's so fucking hard. And then then I said, like, well, if I had ravens in there, I could do it in ravens. And like his reaction was like, oh, really? And he's like, okay, so if I get those ravens and you're gonna do it, I'm like, for sure, why wouldn't I? Like, if I don't have to pay for the ravens, why would I not do it? And I thought this is one of these conversations that you get if you FC a lot, that people come with you saying like, oh, we can do this awesome stuff. Look, we can do this and this and this and this. And it requires the FC to work more than anything, like you have to do it all on your own. The guy's just talking. And I thought like, it's like, we're just dreaming. Like it's not gonna, we don't have to really do it next week or anything. Like I forgot about it the next day basically. But Riven didn't. So he went out and instead of just planning, he planned it, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm not sure what the time frame exactly was, but 2 or 3 weeks later, he actually came back to me saying, so Pando, I figured this out. We can do it in freighters, and we can do it this and this way, and it's all gonna be great. And the first 4 freighters are already in. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect it really, but I was like, all right, I guess this is happening. So I just I was happy to then look forward to this. I didn't have an idea about the time frame too. I didn't know exactly how long it's going to take him, or like there was no team at the time too. You have to think about like him being all on his own at the time, and he just puts it in 4 freighters full of ravens, to prove the point, to maybe convince other people, other friends to help him. Then I wasn't of any help for that. I don't have any freighters, ISK or anything to help there. So
yeah, it was definitely something that people always like fantasized about doing, and I didn't believe that it could happen at first either, because people always like, oh, we should evict HK, or how would you evict HK? And I think the general consensus was you needed to seed like hundreds of carriers to get it done. That's what we saw them do when they destroyed the Keepstar in Inner Hell's home hole. And so for a long time, it was like, yeah, okay, Riven, it's never going to happen. But then he was able to convince us, also with the help of Prometheus, who was CEO of Tempest Legion once it renamed to Temporary Insanity for a while. He kind of helped Riven bring myself and Dom on board and hype us up and make us actually believe that it could happen. Because it was definitely viewed as sort of an impossible task among the wormhole community, and I think the community at large.
To that notion, it was quite funny because the conversation with Pando, I know he forgot about it now a little bit because it's been a while, right? But we were up.
Yeah.
I mean, the conversation started like oddly with you talking about the Sphinx is so much older than it really is. Don't you know, Riven? It's 20 million years old. There have been civilizations before.
He's not even kidding. I love that shit. Yeah, I love that stuff.
He drifts off doing weird stuff, but I enjoy talking to him. And one of the things I enjoyed about Panda was that this is a signature, like Alliance signature level FC, who just sits down and shoots the shit with people. He doesn't care who's on comms. He's just having fun, and he's very approachable. So we had a lot of late nights talking a lot of shit about a lot of things, and I'm like, oh, there he goes again. And the conversation I think drifted onto Keepstars and HK in general, because I had seen Pando very recently ref a Keepstar under a super cap grid, so to speak, with like 1,000 hostiles on grid, and I was like, how did you do that? So the conversation it sort of like led into that anyway, right? And it wasn't just that, Pando. Like that night we were up talking a lot of stuff about how would you get the Ravens, if you get them in package, what would you do, this and that. And let's drop a bunch of citadels, hundreds of them. What will they do? So, it was a lot of dreaming that night. But as Pando said, most people forget about that stuff when they wake up in the morning because it was just a nice dream. Well, I didn't. I think it was a very interesting conversation, and I saw it as a personal challenge that, let's try to figure this out. So I got to finding Rage, and that I started rage rolling for it because I didn't even know where it was. It took me about 20 days to find them.
One sec, Riven. Move your mic to the side. You're blasting our ears out here.
Talk to the side of your mic. If you talk right to it, it carries all the air right into it, and it's just a technical change, but it'll help your voice.
Better now?
Much better. It wasn't it. Not a big deal.
Sorry, we'll fix it in editing.
Fix it in post.
Fix it in post.
Yeah, I think so. Picking up on that motivation question of yours, Matterall, from my perspective, it seems like we sort of had several different entities coming at this with some, own like separate sets of motivation. And at least for me, and I think Ari too, if I can speak for her, some of the story for us started back with that Tempest Legion background. Kind of left it on a cliffhanger earlier, like intentionally, but we got ourselves involved in an eviction with Vision Inc., the executive corp of one of the large wormhole alliances, Hull Control. And they were AFK at the time, and we thought it would be a good loot pinata. And when we got involved in that operation, there was a lot of stuff that happened. But the long and short of it was HK eventually stepped in and intervened and basically forced us to back down. And said, if you don't back down, you're getting evicted. And we didn't have the means to prevent that. And that event actually sort of snowflaked, or butterfly effect is the term, and sort of led to the demise of our corp and a lot of disillusionment with wormhole space among our guys. It sort of felt like a glass ceiling, I think, for a lot of our dudes. And it felt like, man, if you ever get a little bit too far out of line, Big Daddy Hard Knocks is going to come and like keep you in line. And so a lot of our guys just quit the game. A lot of them felt disillusioned with wormhole space. And before long, our corp had kind of disbanded. We eventually attempted a reboot later as Temporary Insanity, and we saw a little bit of success there, but that didn't even last very long. But at least for me, walking away from that experience, there was some element of personal revenge that I wanted to seek against Hard Knocks, because I felt like they had kind of squashed the game for some of my friends that I really enjoyed playing with, and no longer, could play with anymore because they weren't around. So
I have a little story to tell about wanting revenge with HK as well.
Let's hear it.
Okay, this is not well known. I don't think Mittens knows this, or he might remember parts of this story, but not very much of it. I'm going to take us back to the big war, and to the phase when the Imperium had retreated to Saranen and was fighting out of Saranen. One of our corporations in the Bastion, unbeknownst to me, had set up an operation in a wormhole as a place to go and hide and do PvE and make ISK while we were in Saranen. And they didn't say anything to me about it, and I didn't notice it. And one day they came to me and said, we have 2 Fortizars set up in a wormhole. We didn't tell you about this. They've been reinforced twice. The 3rd timer's coming up. Can you come and save us? I'm like, what? Who reinforced you? Hard Knocks. Okay. I've heard of Hard Knocks. I'd never interacted with them. I didn't know anything. I didn't know too much about them. So I do a little investigation, and then suddenly there's an offer on the table for a ransom. And they said, pay us 30 bill, and we'll let one of the one of the Fortizars go. And I looked at the situation, and one Fortizar was obviously Bastion, and the other one was on an alt corp out of Alliance. It didn't look Bastion, but it was. And this, anyway, I paid him 30 billion, and they said, thank you very much. No, we don't actually honor our ransom. You should probably have checked with people who knew us better, and they would have told you that. I go, okay, thank you very much. They were polite assholes. Can I say that on the air?
No.
Sorry. And they So those two Fortizars ended up being the second and third Fortizars ever killed in New Eden, and the first two to be killed in a wormhole. So since that day, unlike Sister Bliss, who doesn't have anything against Hard Knocks and has no past history with them, I've been looking forward to an opportunity for some revenge, and I was very happy to have a bunch of Bastion members in the wormhole for this. And I sat down with the newer ones and said, let's talk a little bit about our past history with these guys. We don't like them.
So you gave them that seed of anger that they needed to do the job right.
It's good for you. It helps your blood pressure. I don't know.
HK wasn't always like this, right? Like, did something change, or we could do a whole show on that, but
I can't speak for them. I can with caveats give a little bit of the rest of the Imperium's impressions of Hard Knocks. Well, at least Goonswarm. I don't think Goonswarm particularly has a big hate for Hard Knocks. They tend to see Hard Knocks as being directly related to or closely related to Pandemic Legion in ways that every time you hear that brought up, Hard Knocks always says, oh, no. We only had one or two guys that were connected to Pandemic Legion. We don't believe that at all.
Oh.
Goonswarm in particular feels like, no, they're directly related. And
any evidence on
true.
that? Or?
Oh, yes. A ton of ships were actually from PA when they dropped.
Well, that aside, the sharing of information between the two groups, and if you have any insights into how much Pandemic Legion shares confidential information with other people, not very much. That's not one of the things they're known for. And yet they shared a lot of information with Hard Knocks. So I have reason to not believe Hard Knocks when they say, oh, it was just one or two guys.
Okay. Well, it seems like a tale of two Hard Knocks, right? Because you had the Noobman Hard Knocks, and then you have the Braxis Hard Knocks, and those, I think, seem very different. There's a transition of power there that happened. I'm not sure how far back it goes, but the old guard was basically left or pushed out, and the new guard is the one that seemed to be a lot harder on wormhole people particularly. And does that sound accurate to you guys?
Certainly all the negative stuff we had kind of heard coming from HK was from Braxis.
Yeah, I would echo that statement. There's only so much personal interaction that I had with Hard Knocks under Noob, but even under Noob's CEO office, Braxis was one of the main FCs, and when we were running into tension there, it was still mostly from him. So maybe there's something to that. I'm not totally sure.
Mm-hmm. For me, HK, and we're describing HK so you can see what Carneros, I think, embodied it perfectly. There's a lot of revenge going on in this whole scenario, which is part of the delicious nature of EVE Online, right? Like if you get wronged, there are methods. They take a long time, but even the little guy can come back and strike at the big guy in a big way. But here, HK was a group that was friends with a bigger and not a bigger but stronger group, which was Quantum Explosion. And Quantum Explosion were just devastating in wormholes, and they kind of basically eliminated everybody in C6, the biggest class of wormholes, so that they could pacify those and rent those out, since there were so few of them. They're very valuable. There were few of them, which means you could get to them easier, and then you could actually corral them and make them your own and rent them out to other people, or at least enforce extortion. If somebody wasn't paying you when they lived there, you would take care of them. And Noobman and HK were a part of that. They were part of the coalition that did that, and Laserhawks was the third party. So those three groups together were the ones that kind of pacified C6 wormholes. But Noobman's group, the HK, seemed like they were mostly, they're a strong group, but they were kind of mostly interested in just generating wealth. So for a long time, because they had Hard Knock Citizens, I think, and those guys were really just they would conquer a lot of space, but they would conquer it for themselves to utilize to make money. So they've been making money a long time. And I think that's why they called the Keepstar that they put in their home system when they became, when they were at the top of the pyramid. Quantum Explosion, by the way, was destroyed when their leader was caught by CCP. There was some allegations of RMT, and he was thrown out of the game. I think they were a Russian group, if I'm not mistaken. And so HK was kind of left with all this stuff that they had earned with Quantum Explosion. Quantum Explosion's now out of the way. So now you have HK with a ton of wealth. They've been generating wealth this whole time. And they build a Keepstar as soon as they arrive in their home system of Rage. It was the first Keepstar ever built, and they built it just a few days after Keepstars were even available. And that was built by former Black Legion guy, Muhadin. And so we did a show on that. You can listen to it in our archives. But they describe how they put it together, how they planned it, and all this other stuff. So we really saw the birth of Fort Knox on this show. And you can imagine they called it Fort Knox for a reason, right? They had all that wealth in there. And I don't know what happened after a while, if they were evicting people and taking their stuff, or, whatever else HK went on to do, I wasn't that familiar with. But it seems like Braxis took over as leader and really just, from what I hear, just put his boot on everybody's neck that was around him. And there was some talk about, and I don't know if this is true, but HK and Laserhawks, and I guess Shekel Squad was the third part of it now, would just not let anybody grow past a certain point that could possibly threaten them, so they could always remain on top. Any truth to that, or any evidence pointing to that?
It's the impression we definitely got, but I mean, it's hard to say for sure. There's so much rumor and stuff in Wormhole space, but definitely we weren't a fan of kind of the politics and the stuff we saw HK doing.
For the record, I think some of the background of HK there would be best spoken to by HK themselves.
By HK people, yeah.
I think there's some of their own story that hasn't quite been totally reflected there, but at least from our perspective, the impression that we got was like what Ari was saying. To me, the words I've been using to describe it have been like a glass ceiling. It felt like as soon as our group, Temporary Insanity, Tempest Legion, had started to get a little bit too ambitious and was trying to cause a little bit too much uproar, that was when we got shut down. And we've seen a similar trend happen for some other groups. And so that was what we perceived from our end.
Yeah. So the point of all this is that there's a lot of money supposedly inside this unkillable structure, the Keepstar. And that's what sets the stage for some of the burning revenge scenarios that are starting to play out from Carneros to other Wormhole group. And you have Pando looking at this delicious loot drop inside of an impossible situation, and they start talking about, I guess, the Sphinx and ancient things that lead to, I don't know how, something practical like destroying Hard Knox's Fort Knox.
The loot pinata thing was definitely a motivator, because we kept saying, I kept saying to Riven, it's the biggest loot pinata probably any game has ever seen. If you think about it, like, what game allows that, to drop everything and stuff, that people can lose that much? And then, is there any structure that's in EVE that would drop as much? By far not, I think. I mean, I don't know how much wealth like Laserhawks has or so, but I doubt that's going to be on the same level. So that was a motivating point for sure.
Yeah, so that was. So it was not just, hey, this will put us in the record book forever. This is like, wow, that's going to be a huge payday. And was it?
Of course. Yeah, so I think the other guys might be more on point with the estimation, but I think it's 1.5, maybe 2 trill. A lot of people, because we called it free for all after a while, because it was just too fun. We didn't want to, leave our friends out of this. Like, we should, get some stuff out of it and stuff. So we called it free for all. So it's very hard to guess how much came out of it. And the screen I just saw, that's, by the way, fake. It's not from the Keepster.
That's not real.
So it's like, we guess it's 1.5 to 2 trill. I don't know. Maybe the other guys have a better idea.
So if I step in and speak a little bit about this, and remember, these are all like estimations, ballparking. It's very hard to tell what's actually what, because you'll have to consider, even with Init, spearheading this, there was a lot of people from other alliances as well, and we just don't know how much was looted. But if we were saying that we got like, I don't know, 10-20% of everything that dropped, I mean, 2 trillion is a very low ballpark. And a source within HK reached out to one of our allies, one of our associates, and was just like teasing a little bit, like, do you want to know how much I think was self-destructed so far? And we're like, yeah. And like, by my estimate, at least 3 trillion so far, which is a pretty big number, considering that if 2 trillion is a low ballpark for what dropped from the first one, and 3 trillion was destroyed, you can just, get your numbers from there. It's probably higher than that.
Yikes.
Yeah, I saw Capri mention on a Reddit thread that he was estimating something like 8 total, but obviously a lot of that was either secured or self-destructed or somehow other ways destroyed. And he estimated 1 to 2 was going to drop. Capri
was on point with the estimation.
FC.
Yeah, so those numbers come from a Hard Knocks member talking on Reddit. So we don't know if they're true. I don't know anybody that knows how much money was actually in there or how much ISK. There's only what got picked up, and you can't even measure that because so many different people did the picking up. So we can only estimate.
Only Bob knows.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so now here's an interesting thing is that this was even possible. When did you start to think like, yeah, this can be done? And is that the same strategy you ended up using to wipe out HK and Rage?
Are you speaking about the tactical part of it or the logistical part of this one?
No, the tactical part. Did the tactics that you plan to use end up being the same tactics you actually used? Did anything evolve in the time you're planning?
So what I thought would happen was that if we jump in, so my concern was we have to jump in all our time zones at the same time. Because if you think about it, we form at 1500. The goal was to reach the wormhole at 1600, which we made possible actually. And then we had to jump in all our time zones, at least from Init, at the same time, and then live from whatever we have in there for like till the second timer. Because the first timer, I actually predicted correctly that they're not going to take the risk and scrambling some forces together and trying to contest it, because our numbers were like crazy at that time. So they were just watching, and then I thought they would probably go with a capital heavy approach, get as many friends of theirs in. They evicted Inner Hell, and they used like around 200 tunes, a lot of them in caps. So I was guessing that if we start evicting them, they're gonna have at least like 100, maybe 200 dudes possible in caps. Then all the friends from Wormhole Space. Then we are Nullseekers. We expected all of Wormhole Space to rally up behind them, which would be number-wise would be crazy. And before this all happened, like everyone would have told us they're gonna have like 1,000 fucking capitals or whatever, like some crazy numbers. Right? Everyone, like Hard Knocks was the boogeyman. So I expected them to have a shit ton of caps, but at the same time, I knew they're not going to be prepared for the meta we bring, because like even in Nullsec we're a little bit different, and I would have thought we can surprise them, and I mean obviously we did, but in a different way. I would have thought they. So my prediction was actually that they form carriers. They realize they're not going to catch our Ravens with it, and then they switch to maybe max Ormunans and then try to hunt the Ravens. And and then expose the subcaps. And then the plan was to actually bomb them with a traditional nullsec bomb run from like all kinds of directions, and then warp the rest of our subs onto them to pin them down and wipe them out. But yeah, the real fight was about hull control in reality. So it was a little bit different, but not entirely. Like it was kind of as predicted, but not not too crazy.
So
Go ahead.
some of the things about the initial plan and what it eventually evolved into. And this gives you a little bit of a background on things, right? It's initially Panda was speaking to his ability to, if I could get 200 ravens, I could do a lot of work with that. So my original plan was, okay, well, let's get 200 ravens in, and 200 ravens. We did a little bit of the math, and I thought to myself, well, a freighter can hold 22 to 24 ravens, depending on skill. So one wormhole connection fully masked is going to hold 4 freighters, and we can put 4 freighters. That's going to be 88. So 8 freighters maybe to start with, and maybe some more on top of that. But and this is where I have to give credit to Prometheus Starfire, the former CEO of the Tempest Legion iteration that became Temporary Insanity. Because when I mentioned it to him, he's like, "This sounds like a good idea, but you need way more." So that's when he did convince Ari and Dom on the spot that this is real, it's a good idea, and we should all make freighter characters and help Riven in this endeavor. So what started off as 200 ravens became a whole lot more, because what we saw practically during the operation is when you speak to the numbers of the defenders versus the attackers. So the attackers need to be in hull control all the time, but nullsec people usually don't play as much as wormholers. And wormholers, if there's an eviction going on, they're canceling work and they're staying up 18 hours a day and sleeping 6 hours, and they start over again. Whereas for us, we have a lot of people who can log in and play 2-3 hours a day, and that's it. So you end up in a scenario where you have to ship up a lot of people with munitions and ships that you don't even have in Rage. So you have to put them there beforehand. And then a lot of these people will disappear. So you have to, outfit other people as well. So you end up in a scenario where you have to outfit several times the force you would actually need at any time. And then you have to contend for, time zones as well. So the logistical part becomes so much bigger than what you thought from the beginning.
Yeah, the numbers at the very start, like what also was our problem there, we invited goons to have the first bit of control, and we jumped in around 1,000 subs, but it was all small stuff. It was all, Stukas, Let's Bombers and stuff, and goons injectors. But from form up to the first rev, it was around the 4-hour mark. That's a long op for most people. And the Goon Swarm guys, like all the other Imperium guys, they weren't prepared for like a full-on CTA, crazy modes, whatever. Like our guys knew there's some real stuff happening, but the other guys, they didn't know, so they had to rotate out after we revved the first Keepster. So effectively, after we revved the first Keepster, we were all alone in that wormhole. Yes, with most of our time zones in there, but not all of it. And then, all of wormhole space started to roll in. So that was a little bit concerning, That was actually a surprise to me. I thought all these guys are going to be hyped about this, but apparently the Imperium guys were not hyped enough, because it was 4 hours of fleet and there was nothing happening at start. And all we did is like setting up, basically. So they rotated out, and then they had to come back later. And then, we brought in Snuff and I think it was Asher's Reavers that we jumped in with like solid subcap doctrines.
But yeah, as far as the process of how we got things going for the plan, it was a long time. And Riven started out at the beginning kind of secret shopping the idea with Ari and I a little bit, just kind of trying to not commit any obvious information that might be compromised, obviously, as you do with this sort of thing. But the question was always the numbers. And then after Prometheus and him had talked and they sort of laid out what their envision what their vision was for the way things might unfold, and how if we can get the freighters in there, we might be able to get the bodies with Pando and his guys. I mean, it started to look real, but we still had a lot of work to do for the next year, getting those Ravens in there. And we had to develop some plans there. I don't know if Riven and Ari want to maybe...
Well, before you go on, two things. One is, why did it take so long to get the ships in there? And two, how'd you keep it a secret? Like, that's amazing. But first, tell me, why did it take so long for those of us that are uninitiated in this?
Sure. So the goal is, in any wormhole situation, how do you get the ships into the hole? And in the best case scenario, if you have your freighters sitting in the case-based connection that's connected directly to Hard Knocks, you can get 4 freighters in there, or about 30 battleships or so. So the problem is getting the ships into the hole, and then the secondary problem is doing that without being seen. So Riven came up with the idea to put the hulls into freighters, which allowed for a lot more freighters per connection. But you still had to get the freighters into Rage. And we had to sort of come up with some solutions on how to accomplish that. I think Riven can speak to that better than I can, though, because he came up with the idea.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it was you could put the unpackaged Ravens, the packaged Ravens into a freighter and put the freighters in. But the method for this initially, when we started, is the basic idea of seeding any wormhole. You roll for a connection, and when you get it, you hope to God that they're not active, they're not scanning, and you have enough time to put your seed through, and then safe log them before anyone notices. Now, the entire notion when we started of doing this was kind of insane, because we were speaking about one of the most dangerous wormhole corps ever in New Eden existence. And the idea that they would not notice 4 freighters coming through a new wormhole connection was ludicrous. I told myself this, and same as Ari and Dom told me, that how you expect that they're not going to see you.
Yeah, and you sure as hell have no chance of getting it through their chain connection, because they're going to see 4 freighters coming up their chain and like massing holes and everything.
Right. So the hope was you roll into them. You have a scout on the inside who can try to tell you that everything's cool. Watching the other screen with the scout, and then the Ravens, the freighters log in. They join fleet, they undock, they warp to the hole. I mean, as you can see, this takes a lot of time, and all this time you have to hope that nobody sees you. And during this time, you have a rolling carrier ready on the hole that if they see you and they start scanning, you just close that hole and you kick yourself a little bit, because you've been rolling for however many days, got a connection, but they saw you, so you had to start over again. Because the main plan was, the most important thing was not being seen, more than getting stuff in, right?
So originally we had freighters that we were staging in a couple of staging C5s with C5 statics, so that we could rage roll from 2 or 3 locations, just Riven, Ari, and I, with our own characters. And if we got a connection, we would ping each other and get the freighters logged in and warp to the hole. That only worked once or twice, I think, before we realized it was just taking way too long. We averaged about 20 days per connection, because it's 3 of us.
Yeah, and that was 20 days of hard work, because you have to think of it this way. I mean, now that, as you've mentioned on your show before, the rage rolling part where you collapse a wormhole static connection to get an entrance to another C5, a lot of the wormholers did that to try to get into rage. But when they did it, they had a lot of people, and they needed to do it under a very short period of time, so they could focus all their efforts and hand the efforts over to somebody else. Whereas we had to keep this a secret for a very long time, so we were going at this alone, which is very tedious, and it takes a lot of time. And you know that one connection is not going to be enough. You need so many connections to get this in.
You know what's the funniest part about this? I still don't entirely understand how this all works.
Someday somebody explained what you did.
So I'm like, okay, we've got the freighters, that's good. That's all I need to know.
This is the part that, and I know you specifically want them to get credit for setting it up. I mean, you've been very good about sharing credit with this whole thing, but this is the real work that got done, apart from holding the whole control, which definitely takes a lot of effort. But getting this to a point where it could happen in secrecy in EVE Online with really the paranoid set, right? Wormholers are paranoid. They're always checking their stuff. I mean, this is like sneaking into the castle and lowering the drawbridge kind of thing. And that, to me, is the interesting part of this whole thing, is that how did you do it? It sounds like it took a long time because of the patience to wait for random natural occurrences to happen and to execute on those every time without getting caught or even raising suspicion.
It's what I find the combination of things is fascinating. It's the work you have to put in. I mean, it took a total of like 1 year. Then on top of it, you invest your own money. This wasn't like Alliance spent money. And for like half a year or so, I didn't even tell Bliss or Shines or Bongo or any of the strategic FCs about this, because it was still like, I wasn't sure if this is going to happen. So I just had Riven do this. And then on top of it, there's a high risk of failure too. Like, we could get surprised by these guys, or you get caught with a freighter full of ravens. Like, whose freighter could that be? So like, if you see a dead freighter with ravens, like, everyone knows it's probably in it. So our gig is completely off then. And there was a couple close calls too, as far as I know.
Oh, let's hear that. Did you guys almost get caught when you were trying to seed the wormhole?
So yeah, I think
different ways.
Ari has the most vivid experiences from this. So I'm just going to intro this by saying that midway through the seeding efforts, or quite early in the seeding efforts, Dom and I realized how painful it would be to keep rolling C5 wormholes to get into them, because it took so much time that I made a very crazy mad dash once through K-Space. And I told Ari about it, and she told me I'm absolutely insane for doing this. So I'm just going to hand it over to her and tell her what happened next.
Well, yeah, we decided we couldn't do the rage rolling. It just wasn't effective. So most of our seeding really, I would say, took place in the last like 3 to 4 months. And we started ramping things up by, we got a bunch of scouts in rage, and we would watch their activity, and we would look for connects to K-Space. Mostly we used low sex.
Direct connects.
Yeah, since we were wormholers, and yeah, direct connects, we would we didn't really have jump freighters at that point. So what we would do is we'd scan from that low sec and try to find wormhole chains to get us from like high sec, where we had the freighters, through low sec without going through too many gates. But we ended up having some interesting routes including ones that included like multiple wormholes and gates. We had one freighter getting stuck in a C5 at one point and going through a chain, and only a few of them made it through. But then more scary was we were right outside of rage in the low sec, and I had a Legion land on top of my freighter and sino in like 5 Black Ops battleships on top of us. But they were just out of scram range, and he just had me disrupted. So Riven was there in a Blackbird, and he pointed, or he jammed off the point, and I called for webs from Dom, and he was able to web the freighter to the station that was in the low sec system. So it was such a near miss. If they had been able to get one more bit of tackle on me, we would have lost a freighter full of ravens there. Not that it was that expensive, but we were worried if, maybe they noticed that they were connected to rage, or tried to figure out where these were going to. It could have been a big problem.
Yeah, it could have tipped them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually a really common experience that happened. The direct K-Space, we ended up calling it blitzing strategy, was really effective in some ways, because we could get the freighters one jump away and then wait for an opportune time to sneak them in. So that was nice. But the problem is, when you're waiting that long, you never know how Hard Knocks is going to use their own connections. And so what happened on multiple occasions was, we get 4 freighters through all these crazy wormhole chains of K-Space to K-Space and whatever, finally to their destination. We don't think we've been spotted yet. And then, late night, some EU guy or whatever in Hard Knocks is gonna go ahead and sign in an extra rolling carrier for himself that he needs, and so all of a sudden, this fresh hull now has 2 caps that went through it, and we can only get 1 freighter versus 4 in, or something like that. So that was another funny obstacle that we ran into multiple times.
As it got closer to the deadline, we started using jump freighters more, and especially once some of the people from Big Shadows got involved, they kind of taught us about how to do that, and it definitely made things easier and a lot less dangerous for the later freighters, because the initial ones were only about like 4 bill worth of cargo, but some of the later ones had like 20 or 50 bill in them, and we definitely didn't want to just be gating those through LOSEC. I remember probably a week or 2 before the op started, I spent most of a day by myself jump freightering a bunch of assets into very deep Iridia so that we could infill, and we were putting them in 1 minute before downtime. That way we could jump them in, and they would hold the cloak from jumping until the server went down. So even if people were watching, they wouldn't even know what had jumped in. But 25 minutes before downtime, just some random HK person decided to take 3 caps out into the LOSEC, and there went all that work for the day of bringing stuff into Iridia.
Yep.
Wow. So yeah, there's some frustrating setbacks.
Yeah, but we were able to get everything in time, and that was in large part due to some of the help from Big Shadows, providing jump freighters for us to use and helping us do the jump freighting.
So
I want to speak to that before we switch topic. We were extremely diligent in the beginning not to get spotted, and I'm proud to say that I think that the initial seeding efforts, we were very careful to make it so that they wouldn't even get suspicious. We never left any, crit holes or things like that. We were very diligent about closing everything and making sure there were no scouts. We even checked the systems to see what neutrals were in there, to see if maybe one of them had been associated with another case base that they've had and could have been an alt. But as we closed in on fall and then the winter, where things started getting a little bit more hectic, we got a little bit more sloppy in like closing connections. Not all of them were closed, so sometimes you would see connections that were masked. And I think maybe not the average person in 8K would have cared too much about it, but I think it should have gotten the attention of the leadership in there that this is the 4th masked connection that suddenly got masked and nobody knows where it came from, what's going on, But we were under the impression it wasn't a ton, but it was some towards the end.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we were working off is these guys are probably the only people in normal space who are not actively worried about an eviction, so they wouldn't even think about that.
Oh, so their confidence worked against them in that respect. Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah.
So what's oh, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was just gonna say I was reading chat as well on the stream here, and someone had mentioned how many freighter alts do these guys have. That was another funny development for the op for a lot of us, I think, because I sort of had a rule before, we got into this with Eve that I only play on 2 accounts. I had my main and my alt.
Good luck with that.
And then this started, and we made a lot of freighter accounts. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I had 14 Omega accounts going into this op.
Yeah, I had about
22.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
a lot
how many
of people used a lot of alts. Also on our first op, when we first jumped in, we had 550 dudes, but I think everyone was like dual boxing, triple boxing, because I called it the mother of all CTAs. So everyone was like, we call CTAs maybe once or twice a year, so better show up with everything I've got. So, yeah.
So let's talk Ravens. Falhorn, you have a question?
Yes. So the Raven Doctrine was very similar to the one that was deployed to destroy the NC Keepstar. Now that wasn't an operational Keepstar, so it couldn't fight back, it couldn't fire bombs. However, you were able to effectively make sure that the doctrine worked. Did that factor in at all anything with the decision of what you were going to be bringing to fight the Hard Knocks Keepstars?
So we did Ravens way before that H-5 one, but I certainly that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to go for H-5, even though some people didn't believe we could do it against NC block. But I kept hyping 4 ravens for people to keep skilling 2 ravens, even though we didn't use them for a while. And I didn't want to use them because I didn't want to give anyone an idea or remind people like, hey, you better have a counter for this, for obvious reasons. But I really wanted people to have at least that one practice run. And for myself too, right? I didn't run them for like, I don't even know, half a year or something. I think the last time we used them really was 9-4. That was the Horde Keepster. And we lost the entire fleet, by the way. But we got the Keepster reft on our own with 2 full coalitions ready to go in range. So it was still a success. We paid like some bill for it, but we got it reft. And I think that was the convincing fleet for the guys to actually keep seeding and see, yeah, we can pull this off. Because like if like all of PanFam, all of GOTG are actually in range, they know that Keepster as a target. They have fought ravens before, and yet they still couldn't stop us reffing it. You know, what if we surprise Hard Knocks with it? Like they're not going to have anything ready for it, which turned out to be true.
Yeah, because we
So,
saw
yeah.
that they brought capital support. They had a lot. They had Titans and Supers sat on top of the Keepstar, and that's something you wouldn't get in Wormholes. So they could only scale down their possible force that they could bring in.
Were there any parts that surprised you on how this all worked out? Or was it about what you expected? What was your biggest surprise?
Obviously, the biggest surprise was that they, on day 2, they gave up. You know, after they lost like 70 dudes. If you lose 70 dudes in a fight, I mean, it's not the end of the world.
In a wormhole, it is, isn't it?
Well, it is, but it isn't, because at the time when they lost it, the fight was fairly even. So it was about horde control. We had 200 Stukas. They had 200 Munins and Serbs. Munins and Serbs are really good at killing Stukas. And on top of that, we had like 60 ravens. Ravens are really shit at killing Munins. So if you want to factor them in, we killed 1 Loki with them, I think. So my problem when they took horde control for those 5 minutes or whatever, my problem was I was stuck in a ship. We were living out of a POS. So I couldn't easily switch around and stuff. And it's same for the people in Ravens, that we couldn't just switch them back to Stukas or whatever. And we just had these 2 ship types. So my concern was that they would just keep killing our Stukas, which would have been possible. But then this misclick or whatever happened, or misclick, probably a mix of both, where their FC, he kept warping after Ravens.
This is Capri, right?
That's Capri, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he kept warping up after Ravens, which is, one approach you can do. But basically, we were just there with the Ravens to distract at best, because the Ravens are not going to kill shit. And but at some point, he couldn't warp to his, I don't know, Magus or whatever he always warped to. So he picked a new target and then warped to the wrong one and landed at 30 from the Stukas.
Which is perfect bombing range.
Exactly. You want to, actually, it's not the perfect bombing range, because in Stukas you move in a little bit faster. So you want them to land at 40, so you have more room to, bomb wave after wave. But obviously Munins are fast, so 30 is good. And and then Bliss actually pulled it off and actually killed 70. But even with those 70 losses, 130 Munins and Serbs, they're really good at killing Stukas if you know what you're doing. But they have never fought Stukas. And I think every group in the game that fought Stukas for the first time, they always get caught every single time. There's no group that didn't have to learn it the hard way. So and it made us look invincible probably for them, because within 1 minute 70 of their dudes were just out. Boom, that was it. So I think they were a little bit gun shy after that, and because it was just that one FC they had available, that's at least how I felt like. They didn't have anyone else to step up, and then they decided to give up. That was my surprise. Not trying to roll in anymore after like I think day 3 or so, and not trying to get more people in. Really, they didn't try any sneaky stuff, bait us out or any of that stuff. There was nothing really, and that really surprised me. I thought they would have 24/7 tried some tricks or whatever, some wormhole tricks, tried to surprise us.
Well,
so I was a little bit worried about that, but
for the
nothing.
record, the fight didn't completely go out of him. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Virgil, who actually killed Ari and mine mains last night. We were a little sad that there wasn't a little bit more resistance, but there are some dudes who are still resorting to some guerrilla tactics, and we were rolling a frigate hull and pod swapping in some Hicks last night, and he just warped a Saber over and killed 3 of our pods. So there was some fight left. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, there was a comment earlier about all Initiative did was pile in numbers into this thing. And if you think that, you haven't been listening to this show, because as I was saying, we spent a lot of time talking about the infiltration, the careful logistic work that was done. Again, that's like sneaking into a castle and lowering the drawbridge so that the troops can run in. That's all part of the same plan, the same event. It's what this game is all about, really. And I think that if you listen to the show, the first part of it, you'll get a lot of that story and richness of story there.
The thing is, those people, they say that only because we had hull control. If Hard Knocks would have had hull control, what do these guys think would have happened? They would have just brought in new ships? Like, no, 300 Pandemic Horde were formed. Probably another 100 wormholes were formed just quickly for that 5 minutes window they had hull control. So that's around the 400 dudes they would have flooded in. And if they hold hull control for like a whole day, they would have complete opposites, the complete opposite of numbers. It's that's just. It looks at the end. It looks like we hardcore blobbed them, because on the final time we had like 1,300 dudes on the Keepster. But if you think about it, it's not that hard to get in 1,300 dudes over like 60 hours of time with hull control, and get them excited for the biggest loot pinata the game has ever seen. That's not the challenge, right?
No, and I think frankly that's what you brought to the table, Pando, because I don't know how many FCs could really get their guys to do that. There might be a few, but I think a lot of guys would be like, yeah, I'll see you later. Somebody else do this work of waiting and waiting and waiting. But your troops seem to be really, really loyal to you. And that's why it feels like that was part of the elements, was your how much faith your guys have in you to stick around and make this happen. And there is the momentum of, this is going to be cool. It's going to be a huge loot drop and all that. But there's also the charisma that you bring to your fleets. I think that was a part of it.
So I think that was a surprise to me too, that we had so good numbers and people were actually taking this campaign very well, even though there was very little fighting during the day. We had these 2 fights, and then that one deciding fight, of course. But in general, there was very low activity. But people, they were hanging out, having been in the whole control fleet and so on. But the feedback I got from especially older dudes was always like, "Oh, this feels like a campaign of the old days," because you travel to the destination, you have that clear-cut objective. Everyone knows what we're there for. Then they travel, and then they finally get into the destination, which is unknown space for most people. They're like, "Oh, wormholes, that's scary. Don't want to get rolled out." But then they finally jump in, and you jump in, and the first thing you see is a blue fleet holding hull control with a carrier, and everything is prepped, and there's stuff in the making and constantly pinging out orders and stuff like this. So it really felt like a very different, almost old school campaign to people. And I think, yes, the loot pinata played a role too. Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we're kind of writing history here." And there might be some good ISK coming out of it, but I think most people weren't in it for the ISK. I mean, that for sure, some people got away with a shit ton of.
I think CCP called
it before.
I think CCP called them scavengers in the scope video. It's really funny.
But they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
But I
mean,
have to tell you what I got.
You saw the scene, right?
Yeah,
With all the loot cans, and then people warping from one can
Yeah,
to the other because they're so far from each other. You can just warp from one side to the other, and everyone was just constantly looking for that lucky draw, basically. And
Hold
most
on,
of them
Brennan.
are just like, oh, a 3,200 kit booster.
Yeah. Santa didn't give us a good present this year, I know. Well, before you go there, I think you're right about that feeling of like camping and waiting for the battle and the troops huddled around a fire in the night kind of thing, talking about what's going to happen, because there's a definitive end to this. And it reminded me of not gate camps, but hell camps. Like when you had the enemy trapped and you were sieging the castle and just kind of surrounding it and waiting and daring them to try to make a break for it and stuff like that.
And at the same time, everyone knew, especially like at the beginning, that there's like 200, 300 hostiles trying to roll in. And at some point they did. And then they flooded the fucking gates with Serbs and everything they had, and we had to close it quickly, and we struggled to get there in time, and it was a race. And if you're not organized well, a Stuka fleet needs to be proper organized to be effective, and then you quickly warp around and try to catch them. But what if they turn around and suddenly decide to fight, and then boom, from 1 second to the other, you're inside of like the deciding fight maybe. So it's always that little bit of what do you call it? I wouldn't say anxiety, but
Tension.
Yeah,
So-
the tension. There was always a little bit of tension in the air.
So this was not a done deal. Once you rolled in, there was ways that you could have lost this.
Definitely.
For sure.
If we would have lost the whole control that one fight, we would have lost whole control for longer. They would have gotten in Horde, they would have gotten in these other Warhammer guys, they would have outnumbered us easily, and we were stuck in 2 ship types, so they know exactly what we can field, while they supposedly could choose ship type to some degree. Not entirely, as it turns out, but they could have brought in a bunch of carriers, they could have brought in or undocked like Munins, Max, all kinds of stuff.
Well, and those first couple hours were just so crucial because we had a lot of dudes, but they came in frigates, and we needed to ship them into those unfit Ravens. So some of the logistics guys, and Big Shadows especially, had a big part to play. Riven.
Real quick to Carneros, I just want to know what you got out of it.
The only piece of loot I got was a DBRB corpse.
That's not loot. That's like coal in your sock or in your
It
stuff.
cracked me up. I thought it was really, really funny.
That's right. He did get killed on screen. I think he was streaming and he got he got murderized, sent home.
I'm going to
kinda
save
fun.
it for someday when I get a Moloch.
That's actually you need to keep that. That's a collector item. Okay, so I want to move on to the last part of this, I think, and that is what we saw right afterwards was HK's ally Laserhawks start to take down, and they're still not down because they take at least a week. They're keep stars, so they're bugging out. How has this changed wormhole space?
So about the Laserhawks thing also, we were like, after HK gave up and it was clear that there's no one fighting. So after the first Keepstar, we actually shared a static with them. Like late at night, someone said, hey, like our static has actually a direct wormhole into the Laserhawk static. So I told the guys to pack up a small pulse, and we I pinged out a fleet. Let's go. So we wanted to just get in there, kill one of their pulses, and put up our pulse to just, fake it basically and see what they react like. But before we could get there, they instantly rolled it. They saw one of the tunes and instantly rolled the wormhole. And then I think a couple hours later, they started unanchoring their Keepstars. So it was kind of funny. It was just supposed to be a joke, but maybe a little bit of an overreaction on that part.
So basically, from the system that you had just conquered, a direct connection to Laserhawk system opened. You were going to go in there and plant the flag to scare them. It didn't happen because they closed the hole fast enough.
Not a direct one, but a very short connection. Yes.
Yeah. That didn't happen, but that was enough to scare them to start taking down their infrastructure. Sound right?
Exactly.
Anyone have anything to add to that? I'm curious how it changes Wormhole's perspective of what Null can do.
So I think it changes perspective for wormholers to see what Null can do, but if you're a wormhole and you're listening, you shouldn't be too scared, because it wasn't easy at all. It was quite hard to hold whole control with a lot of people who don't know what they're doing exactly. But like if we didn't have a strong team of doing all that, it would have been impossible. Like knowing all these little tricks, the door stops and the whatever, like having battleships ready, having rolling hicks ready for frig holds, just being aware of the whole situation. Like, it takes a lot. And I think you also need to have the right doctrines for the job, obviously. And not a lot of people are flying Ravens. Like, I think nobody does actually. I mean, most warmongers don't have keeps though, so you don't need Ravens. But I think in general, it's not going to be a common thing suddenly that nullsec guys are gonna go and evict someone. It's a lot of work, and the biggest loot pinata of the game is already gone. So
yeah, and addressing what Panda is saying here, what it means for wormhole space. Well, to get into that, you also have to see what nullsec had to invest in this. This was the largest CTA that we've done. I think, I don't know, I haven't been in the initiative, for years and years, but it was, this was more people here than X47, the Titan brawl, so to speak. And it doesn't do CTAs very often. They're very few and far apart. And it was a quiet stretch. There was no wars going on. So in many ways, it was a perfect time to do this because we weren't under assault in nullsec. There wasn't anything major going on. Plus, we had done planning and logistics and seeding for a year. Thousands of cumulative hours put in. On top of this, you have to give the people in it a lot of credit. The general line member and the everyday member who just put in hours of work, whole controlling, learning wormholes, lending their aid, doing DST trips. I mean, everybody that we met when we were doing our logistics stuff was so patient and courteous, and they helped out and they asked if they could do anything. They have a DST. Can we bring in some ammo? Can I switch this ship? Can I help you with that? So everybody stepped up to an insane degree. So this is not a common thing that you should expect from nullsec to happen, and not to this degree at all. This is a one-off, and I think this might be the only one-off.
Yeah, to put it frankly, I don't think very many people have the kind of autism that Ari and I and Riven did to spend all this time sitting and seeding freighters.
Not to mention, you can bet if Init puts out a CTA in the near future, a lot of the high class wormhole people are going to be watching their connects, and it's going to be hard to sneak in a 800-man fleet again.
And since Riven talked about the timing of this, it couldn't have been a better time. I think when we call for a CTA, all hostiles will know. So I know Black Legion was formed with 200 dudes or something, and we actually traveled by them next door. But all the northern guys were probably watching what's Init doing. And I think the timing was perfect because of this weirdo agreement with the faction forts and all that stuff. And we clearly weren't happy with all that stuff. And then we called the mother of all CTAs to do some big stuff. And I think everyone was looking north a little bit, which helped us maybe from an HK perspective. It was all quiet and there was no obvious targets or at least direction where we would go. Maybe they would have been a little bit more alert. They probably were alerts to some degree, but it clearly wasn't enough. And then one rolling carrier is all it takes. We're forming, we're entering the chain, and boom, the doors slammed. And then, what are you going to do? Then we have to turn around or, basically cancel the whole thing. Because they know if Init is forming big, that's for us. So they can always just roll the fucking connection. So what are you going to do?
So now they're going to be more aware, and maybe that'll wear off over time, but at least wormhole space has seen that a motivated nullsec with wormhole guides can wreak havoc on any system. So maybe they'll be more aware for a while. There seems to be a battle of arrogance between initiative and wormholers. They say, "Oh, you did nothing," and initiative saying, "Oh, we ruined you, and you guys think you're so good at this game, et cetera, et cetera." And I think that's unfortunate because behind all that baloney, there's a really cool story here that I'm glad is surfacing. So we're glad you guys are talking about some of the stuff that actually happened. Go ahead, Dom, and then we'll move on. I want to move on to a couple of bits of news.
Yeah, cool. Just one other sort of separate perspective on Fallout for Wormhole Space and like how have things changed. I think my hope and some of the other guys' hope that came from wormholes after like a long history. I mean, not even that long of a history compared to a lot of people out here, but was, I don't know, at least like a desire that maybe there's just a little bit less of a glass ceiling that some people can maybe negatively react to in the past. And like my hope is that, you know, Wormhole Space can be more of sort of like the quote unquote wild, wild west that it's supposed to be, you know, if we're not having to worry as much about retribution from some of the
overlords,
traditional avenues that has come from. Yeah.
Riven?
Right. Just short about the future of wormholes. As I was in contact with a couple of other groups, and they actually had people, top leadership, send me like a short message that thanked the guy who was behind this at the time. I don't know if they knew I was, or if I was somebody who knew the guy, but they said, thank the guy who did this. We're currently starting our crusade against the, you know, C5, C6 bear empire that HK is holding, basically. So there's several prominent groups / coalitions that have seen that the glass ceiling is sort of gone and the throne is sort of, you know, up in the air. So they're making their moves. So all in all, it might be a healthy time for wormholes, you know.
So you overthrew, the overlords of Wormhole Space, and so now maybe the people can flourish again in small groups and go back to the way it should have been, which was a lot of people fighting each other constantly and differently. Yeah,
my hope is that people dream big. They want to accomplish whatever it is they dream up, and they actually feel like they can go do it, you know, and rally people to their cause, because I think that's what drives content.
Dream big so initiative can come in and destroy it.
Well, if I get what you're saying, enemies, that might happen. I don't know. But...
Don't make it too big.
Right. That's what, the overlords are now in nullsec, I guess. No, but it's interesting, that cycle. I think people who understand the situation understand that Hard Knocks is pretty hard on people around them, I think. But
yeah,
you know, I'm not there, but I just from what I hear, it was, you know, they kind of weighed in a lot on things, and when they did, it was they were the big dog on the block.
Yeah, they had the biggest stick for sure.
And it kind of cracks me up. The big dog gets run over by a car, and then you have the little dog that's yapping next to him, Laserhawks. I'm being so rude here, but they're like, "Oops, we got to get out of town."
Watch out, Matterall.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some Laserhawk hate, and I like those guys. I think I've talked to them a long time ago. So they were doing some cool stuff.
Before you end on this topic as well, I just want to say thank you to Hard Knocks, because everything set aside, I mean, yeah, some people will spin this as just a personal, you know, grudge, revenge thing, and definitely there are different motivations of why you wanted to take it down. But I mean, the Imperium is all about building empires, and building an empire isn't easy, and they did that. So they collected a lot of good pilots. They did a lot of epic good things in the game, and ultimately you were chosen as an opponent because you were good, and probably are still good. So I want to give a big thanks to HK, and there's little for you to stand in the way of doing something great again. Just go out there and keep doing your stuff. There's been a lot of hate towards HK, but there's also, you know, a lot of people there who do good stuff and, you know, have built something great. So credit needs to be given where it's due as well.
All right, so for anybody, we'll wrap up this section in just a second, but anybody who wants to talk or discuss, traditionally after a show on Sunday, we all pile into the public chat and we finish talking off air. You know, sometimes we record that and publish that as well, but usually not. So if you are watching this live, then you get a chance to do that. Okay, so I think, is there anything else on this that you would want people to know?
Like in general?
Yeah, is this going to happen again? Is this...
Feeding is hard. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's hard. It's hard work. And whenever you're going to log in your regular accounts, your account login window is a minefield. And if you press the wrong one, the op is over.
That's true.
So
That's true.
Pando, I think you had a note, right?
Yeah, so like what I would love to just get out there, I mean, for the little chance that maybe some CCP guys are listening, they should really rethink the whole asset safety in nullsec. Maybe make it, depending on the nullsec security of the system or whatever. But hey, come on, like give us something. Right? If we kill a structure, give us like 10% or something. Like give people at least the hope of something dropping. But I think that's one of the reasons why you don't see that many fights over citadels and stuff like this. Why would you do it? Like kill at one Astras or like even a Fortizar, it's not a big deal. All the assets in there are going to get transported. Like it doesn't feel like an accomplishment whatsoever if you kill it. And you could tell that people got way more excited for this, even for like smaller citadels in this wormhole. There could be anything in there. And I think that CCP really needs to rethink that and like some other stuff about citadels. For example, the defenses for small scalers. Like if you roam around back in 2010 or so, you would just warp to a station, drop a bubble, and you might get lucky and get a fight. Or if all the hostiles are docking up, like all 100 of them, you just camp the station and call them out, make them look a little bit dumb. But you can't do that really. You're gonna get PDS'd and doomsday and all that stuff. I think citadels shouldn't be able to defend themselves unless they are under attack itself. And and citadels are causing a couple problems. And I just wanted to get that out there because I feel like it's important for the game in general.
Let me push back. Isn't this a lesson that asset safety is a good thing?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Because if there was asset safety, Artnox wouldn't have locked in probably. Just think about it. They would have said, "Oh, look at this! All of Imperium is here," and they would have.
But HK would still have their stuff.
They would still have their stuff, but there would have been no content for anyone whatsoever. This probably wouldn't. I mean, this probably wouldn't have happened then. Because that's part of this excitement is like everything drops. Like all of this wouldn't have happened.
Pando is secretly a wormholer, by the way.
If there was no asset
Definitely
safety,
not.
I completely agree with Pando. What's the reason for doing this if there's no asset safety? Just the achievement itself is one thing, but it's not big enough. The asset safety not existing in wormholes, that makes it very exciting.
Yeah, some of the best fights I've seen in wormhole space have been over the wreckages of citadels in POSB and Adhocracy. And I think it really motivates people and drives a lot of very fun fights. The fighting over the loot field and people wanting to get a chance at that loot.
Okay. Well, I you guys, of course, are the winners. So it feels pretty good to have that driving engine to get you to do something. I wonder the people who are overwhelmed by, let's say, the Imperium attacks, the whole of the Imperium attacks, 500-man alliance that is getting themselves set up, and they lose all their stuff. Does that seem like a reasonable? Should they not be there in the first place, kind of thing?
Well, I think just imagine if, from an asset point of view, just imagine if would have started with no loot drop whatsoever from ships. What do you think would Eve look like if that was the case? Like you undock in a ship, you can lose it. If you move your stuff all into null security, I mean, look at the name, null security. If you move your shit into null security space, your stuff should be at risk. And I think a lot of the EVE community got too soft over time. Like assets are really not the essence of this game, even though it looks like it. And people get too touchy about this stuff. And yes, there's people that might have emergency stuff going on and they can't be there on the day. But look at Wormhole Space, like they're fighting and those timers are way shorter. So if you're AFK for 4 days, you can lose all your stuff. And it's it's unhealthy for the game to have asset safety. That's all I'm trying to say.
It certainly lit a fire under you guys, because this was exciting for everybody, including us, to watch and to talk about. And that's why we're here today.
Yeah, I think it would have lit a fire under anyone, but we just got lucky with the combination of things that we have people with the ISK, time, and will to put in the effort seeding stuff, and at the same time have enough numbers available for the doctrines we fly. Like, we couldn't do it with like just max or something. So I think that all works together quite well, and otherwise we couldn't have done it anyway. So yeah.
Right. Well, Capri popped in for a second, but had to take off. It would have been nice to have a little bit of clarification from him, and we apologize if we didn't get some things from HK's point of view correct. None of us are in HK, although we've talked with them and some of them, and we know what some of them have told us and what's been written in public. But this doesn't mean that the Talking in Station is not obligated to get both sides of the story. We just want to tell a story, and sometimes that's from the people that were behind the planning of it. It's not about fairness. It's about telling a story. It always goes back to that. So someday we'll talk about HK's story too, how they recovered from this and how they're doing really well and that sort of thing. But yeah, so there you have it. I do want to move on because we have something that I think is so urgent, and it's almost a little bit late. But this season we have something coming from CCP that some of you may not have seen. If you're in Talking in Station's Discord, I blasted to everybody so a PSA, basically a public service announcement that you needed to start logging in every day and collecting your rewards, because the last day had a special reward. So Fellahorn, why don't you tell us what the reward is and how it works and why it's so important?
So on the 13th day of the rewards, you can have a look at this if you're in game by having a look at the daily login campaign. Click the arrow to day 13, and it's the Absolute Injector Augmenter. Now, what this booster is something that you use to supplement your use of skill injectors. For a character who has over 80 million skill points, if they were to inject 10 times, they get 1.5 million skill points because they're only getting 150 per the injector. Now, if they were to use the Absolute Injector Augmenter, then inject 3 times, they would get the full 500,000 skill points that the booster provides. So they would only have to use 3 injectors instead of the full 10. So from that, you can immediately look at, without looking into who's going to sell their boosters, this booster is worth a few billion at least. Obviously, markets are going to adjust. People are going to be selling their boosters. Prices are going to crash. Prices are going to go up. People are speculating already. It's going to be interesting. It enters the market on the 23rd, I want to say, so a week from now. That's when the players are first going to be able to get their hands on this booster, and then we'll see how the market reacts.
Right. So you want to get your hands on it as quickly as possible, because once you inject it, it has a wear-off time.
So yeah.
Do you want to tell us about the wear-off time?
This is where a lot of people are getting a bit confused, and you can check the numbers yourself. To check it, you have to actually go into the market and bring up the item there. 1 second. So if you type 'A in the search bar in the market, and under implants and boosters, you can actually view the item. The booster has a duration of 57,600 seconds, which means that if you then convert that from seconds into hours, that turns up at 16 hours. That means that the base rate of this booster, you activate it at 4 o'clock in the morning, you can then use another one again at 2000 or 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's quite a spread for the time zone. However, since it's a booster, it is affected by biology. that's why the description of it says that it can affect up to 32 hours.
Okay, so these are the takeaways. One is be logging in every day with your Omega account. Alphas, this won't apply to you. Omega accounts, log in every day, claim your prizes every day until you get to the 13th day where you get this booster that allows you to inject it, and then after you're boosted, get up to 3 full, or they're called large, injectors worth of SP into your character, even if your character has more than 80 million skill points, which usually gets heavily penalized. In this case, you're immune to that penalty, so you get the full 1.5 million SP banked, and you can use that SP for any skills that you want. Once that wears off, you can reboost, and then re-inject 3 more. And from what we've seen, this is the funny part. Biology, the skill that normally lets your boosters work really well for you, is actually hurting you in this case. So you want to either extract that skill down to, well, we'll give you a strategy in a minute, but extract it away or extract it down so that it's not hurting you, keeping the wear off time longer, which in this case you don't want. Normally you do want that. So what is an optimal way of doing this, in your opinion, Falhard?
So I'm just keeping an eye in chat. If you have any questions about this booster, just tag me at Miss Warden, and I'll be able to see. Everyone's still talking about Hard Knocks in chat. So I just wanted to see if anyone's got any questions about the booster. Tag me Miss Warden, and I'll be able to see them. But yes, biology does make this booster last longer. So its baseline is 16 hours, and up to, if you have a look at the description, so this is the information that CCP is giving us. The users will be unable to consume another one of these boosters whilst under the influence of the hangover effects, which may last up to 32 hours after consuming the booster. Now, if you have a look again, if you work out the base rate of the booster is 57,600 seconds, that's 16 hours. So biology at level 5 does make it to that magic 32-hour number, and that's effectively that's the numbers that you can see that we're actually getting provided. Now, the reason they might be doing this is that Cerebral boosters are also entering the market from the 17th tomorrow, with Permafrost, Operation Permafrost being introduced. So you have to run your Cerebral boosters, and then you get to a stage of, if you want to be using these absolute boosters, you'll then have to decrease your biology, which then means you have to buy more boosters. I haven't been able to confirm it direct from CCP, but this is literally, if you look at the way that the booster has the attributes, if you look at its description, you can draw a correlation between the two.
So the point is,
sorry.
oh, go ahead. The point is that you can get banked on your high SP characters somewhere between 15 million SP or 30 million SP at the very, very max. That's the theoretical maximum. And that's just huge. I can't even describe how huge that is. That's why I put out a PSA.
So if you wanted to go full, obviously I don't recommend this, but if you reduce your biology down to 0, you're then on a 16-hour cycle. That means that you'll be able to do the booster 20 times. That's 60 injections. So that is 45 million skill points, I want to say.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was 30.
20 times you get.
We'll do math.
Always have the numbers written down. Yeah, because you can use the booster 20 times, and each 20 times using 20 times 1.5, so 45. Yeah, 3 times. It's 3 times the 1.5, so 45. Yeah.
We'll work out the math and put it in an article for you. But the point is, you can get tens of millions, I think 30 or even maybe more, million SP banked on your high SP characters. That is something that's going to be incredibly expensive. But for those that can do it and want to basically merge two high-level characters together or pull 30 million off of one and put it into another, this is it's basically a respec of your character. It's like a limited respec of your character if you do it right. But
it is 30 million, by the way, just double checking. But that is, again, having to roll it every 16 hours.
Right.
Realistically, you should be looking at biology at level 3, which means you can use the booster every 25.6 hours, and that allows you to use it a maximum of 13 times. So it's interesting. Obviously, if you are someone who has less than 50 million skill points, someone who has no interest in using these, sell them on the market. Players who have the 1% of the 1% who inject a new Titan just because they can, because they've got the ISK, they will be interested in buying and snapping up these boosters. So selling them to market, being some of the first to sell them, should give you good prices. Also, if you run a skill farm and you've been logging in every day to claim the alpha rewards, if you upgrade to Omega, you will then get this booster as well. And then you have an online skill farm that you would then be churning out more boosters. So I predict that we'll see prices of injectors go up slightly and then come down as more are entering the market from everyone who just reactivated their skill farms.
Do you think that, do you know if you're an alpha now, can you switch over to Omega and still claim the reward if you've been claiming your alpha?
Absolutely.
Oh.
If you've been claiming those alpha rewards and logging in, as soon as you upgrade to Omega, you are then given all of the rewards of the days you've then passed into the queue. Now, if you're planning on doing this, I recommend to avoid any missteps, to upgrade to Omega, and then claim that day 13 reward, because then you don't have to worry about CCP things.
Yeah, so we'll write this up so it's a little clear. You should have by now known to be logging in every day and claiming prizes every day, whether you're an alpha or Omega. And you need to switch over to Omega as soon as you can so you can get that final booster reward. And then set your biology to about 3 or 4 so that you pretty much can inject every 24 hours. That's just the same way to do it, because remember, this is over the holidays. And all this expires January 7th. It's all over January 7th. These things go away. They melt like snowballs.
Yes. So that is at downtime on December. So it is effectively 2 weeks and 0.9 of a day, because they get issued after downtime. They have to be used before downtime on the 7th of January.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that's just so important, but it could be just me. But for veteran players,
it's going to be interesting because it is a gift for players. If the booster goes under 600 million ISK, then players who have less than 50 million, it starts making it more cost effective for them to start using it. So, I mean, ballpark figures, we're looking at around maybe 600 to a billion, depending on when you market, depending on when you buy, and depending on how many people want to be using these boosters. That is effectively a free gift for logging in. It's good, it's interesting, and we're looking forward to it be next Sunday when they enter the market.
All right, thanks for that. We want to tell you that we are going to be having a party next week on Talking Stations. It's our holiday party. It was supposed to be today, but we had this Initiative HK thing to talk about since it was so historic. So we've postponed the party to the 23rd, which is next week, and we'll have the crew on to chit-chat. It'll be fun, very informal, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that happened over the year. Then the following week, we'll have actually a year in review where we'll talk about everything that happened this year, all in one show, a special 2-hour show there. I also want to say we have the most influential awards coming up, and you can find those on the EVE Online forums. We posted a post there. But also you can tell us in our Discord who you think is the most influential player and the most influential group. And that can be Streamfleet group kind of thing, or it could be an alliance, or it could be a corporation. Those are the two. We're going to look at those, and Talking Stations crew will vote and we'll vote from the nominees and present the winners for the year at the Christmas party, which is next week.
That's why we wanted to defend our title.
That's right. Last year, Initiative actually shared the prize for most influential alliance with Triumvirate. And last year, the most influential player was Aerith, and it was based on the economic models that had built up what Goonswarm's success is now, or actually the Imperium success. So let us know who you think is most influential player, influential group in Discord. So I want to again invite you to Talking in Stations Discord, where we meet the guests and panel here after the show. I'll put that in chat. And I also want to say we're on 2 times a week now. Artemis is holding down a Thursday show, so check that out. It's very good. He cuts right to it. And that's where we'll probably talk about what's happening with Triumvirate, since they seem to be losing some territory and alliances. And that's where we talk about a lot of other stuff that we just don't have time to cover here on this show. I want to say thanks very much to Athena and Dom, Riven, and of course Pando for showing up today. And we also want to thank Carneros and Fallahorn. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
All right, that wraps it up today. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.